Hi, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun. I'm here with GOMTV to bring you guys a look at the upcoming World of Warcraft expansion, Warlords of Draenor. Before we get into all the changes that are coming with the new expansion, let's first take a look at the game as it's gone through the past. World of Warcraft launched with Vanilla WoW, allowing you to level up to level 60. It had 8 races and content split up over 2 continents. On official launch, raids weren't fully completed, but quickly after they got patched in and raiders got to start the game featuring an epic place called Molten Core. Molten Core was one of the first instances of hardcore 40-man raiding that MMOs ever experienced. For those of you who got to play the game back then, it was really an epic experience. It took 40 players, weeks and weeks and weeks of effort to push through Molten Core and reach the very end. By the time an expansion was announced for World of Warcraft, it had become one of the most popular MMOs in the world. It had actually expanded its raiding content from just Molten Core and Nixia's Lair to Blackwing Lair, Ahn'Qiraj, and Naxxramas as well. The first expansion of World of Warcraft was Burning Crusade. It launched January 16th in 2007. The level cap was raised up to 70, an entirely new continent was added called Outlands, and 2 new races were added to the game, Draenei for the Alliance and Blood Elves for the Horde. Paladins and Shaman could now be played on either side as well. Now, with the launch of Burning Crusade, we also saw a big shift from the 40-man epic gigantic raids. They actually got knocked down to 10 and 20-man size raids. This change was a nice quality of life improvement for many players because guilds were struggling to actually maintain and keep 40 players pushing through all of the raiding content. After Burning Crusade came Wrath of the Lich King. Wrath of the Lich King launched on November 13th, 2008. In 2008, WoW had reached over 10 million subscribers globally, making it the largest MMO to date by a large margin. To this day, no game has trumped the size and success of World of Warcraft. The level cap for Wrath of the Lich King was raised to 80, and they finally added a new class to the game called Death Knights. Death Knights originally came out at level 55, making it very quick to kind of bump them all the way up to 80, and became very, very popular. They were also available for the Alliance and the Horde. A new continent was also added again with this expansion called Northrend. Northrend was a continent filled mostly with frost and kind of decaying death imagery all over the place. It was very frozen, and there's a lot of kind of castles and ghouls and liches and things along those lines. Another nice feature added to the game in Wrath of the Lich King was something called dual specialization. This was the first time players were allowed to actually make 2 specializations, allowing their character to perform different roles, and you could switch between the 2 with the click of a button. Before you were allowed to re-specialize, which was called a respec, which you could pay money to kind of get all of your abilities back and then delegate your points for a second time. But this was expensive and tedious for players, so allowing them to have a dual specialization allowed them to play, for example, a PvP build and a PvE build, where they could actually access more content with less frustration. After Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm launched. Cataclysm launched on December 7th, 2010. Cataclysm brought a Goblin and Worgen races added. Worgen are added to the Alliance, which are a wolf/human hybrid, and Goblins were added to the Horde, which actually finally brought them a midget in line with the Gnomes, who were very popular on the Alliance side in WoW. The level cap was raised up to 85, and a lot of new features were brought in towards the raiding system, including the Raid Finder. The Raid Finder was a nice casual way for players to quickly find a group of players and go and experience some of the raiding content without having to actually organize and form a large guild with weekly schedules and things like that. Raid Finder basically split up the dungeons, gave you a smaller portion of it, and it allowed you to go and experience that easier version of the content with a bunch of players who are not necessarily as organized as the guilds tackling the much harder content, and it gave you fairly close to equivalent gear. After Cataclysm came the current expansion called Mists of Pandaria. Mists of Pandaria launched on September 27th, 2012. The level cap was raised from 85 to 90, and again, a second class was added to World of Warcraft. In the last 10 years, we've only seen 2 classes added. The new class was called the Monk. Monks are capable of healing, tanking, and DPSing, which gave them a lot of variety and a very interesting switch in changing up their specialization for different playstyles. They also added another race called the Pandaren. Pandaren were available for Horde or Alliance. You can pick the race and then choose which side you'd like to go to. The Pandaren mythology has long been in World of Warcraft, with things like the Panda Brewmaster and things like that, reaching all the way back to Warcraft 3 engine back in the Dota days and things along those lines. The Panda expansion has received some mixed reviews from players who seem to be not enjoying themselves as much as some of the older style expansions, and the game has begun to decline in subscribers and viewers. All of these expansions leads us to the current expansion coming out called Warlords of Draenor. Now, as I said before, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun, and I'd like to share with you my experiences in the Warlords of Draenor expansion and my personal thoughts on how everything's going to go in the future for World of Warcraft. So first off, I played the game over a three-day period of time in the beta. Previously, before I experienced any of the beta content, I played World of Warcraft very seriously when I was younger, and have come back to check out every expansion, at least for a brief period of time. I've had a lot of experience in WoW. I was at one point in one of the top rating guilds in the world, and I've also, I guess, achieved the Gladiator rank in PvP multiple times, so I have a bit of experience with the game, and it's really been something that has just been a passion of mine for a really long time. So going forward, these are my thoughts on Warlords of Draenor, the things that I got to experience and test out. So first things first, I jumped into the game and I created a character, and I allowed the randomize feature to help me out, and I got a Death Knight named Prick. He was a little goblin, and I very quickly realized that even a short amount of time away from WoW has really drastically shifted my ability to play the game. It was very difficult. I was dying over and over in the beginning, trying to just get myself back into the swing of things and get my feet kind of planted in figuring out what I should be doing again and how to play the game. Most of the abilities are not so different that they felt super foreign to me, but they are changed enough that the way I used to play the game is no longer even remotely acceptable. So one of the things that they did in Warlords of Draenor that was really nice is they actually trimmed down on the abilities significantly. There's way fewer skills to use than before, and at first glance it might seem a little bit like it's restricting the game or taking away from it, but I actually feel like it enhanced the game for me. Back when I used to play World of Warcraft all the time and I was very serious into the arena scene, you had to have a key binding for pretty much every ability your character had. This led me to double and triple binding alternate keys just to get enough key bindings across my keyboard. It was getting absolutely ridiculous, and remembering and being able to manage all of those was a skill on its own. The game became almost similar to playing a piano with how many keys were being struck just so that you could perform in the top level. With Warlords of Draenor, they've trimmed these abilities back, and they've actually made it a lot more accessible for all players. So instead of having, say, 50 or 60 or 70 keybinds, you're probably going to be cut down to more around the 20 range. I found myself filling up my first bar and then one bar above that, and I actually felt like the game was pretty playable at that point. Now, I wasn't trying to min-max the game at this point in time. If you really are doing that, you're probably still going to be looking at maybe 20 to 25 keybinds, but it's significantly smaller, at least cut in half from what I was dealing with before. The other big change in Warlords of Draenor is that the number values in WoW just kept rising with every expansion. Every expansion that came out basically just made all the numbers go up a significant amount. So at vanilla WoW, you might have 6,000 health. In Burning Crusade, you jumped all the way from 6 to about 25,000. So the numbers are multiplying by basically a 5 ratio to get you to this ridiculous level of power that was actually allowing you to go and crush earlier content because the numbers were so skewed in your favor. So with Warlords of Draenor, what they've done is they've rolled back the numbers for the new content. The old content is still actually using the different mathematical formulas, so you can still go and one-shot Molten Core single-handedly, and it's a lot of fun, but at the same time, the new content is a lot easier to understand. As you can see from the numbers popping up on screen, they're a lot lower. They're back in the thousands range and a lot more understandable. It was getting a little bit too ridiculous for players to wrap their head around critting for 4 million, so they kind of drew everything back and made it a lot easier to understand, which I think was a fantastic change to the game. A lot of the statistics have been changed in Warlords of Draenor as well. Stats that used to exist and were frankly kind of confusing for players have been streamlined and made a lot more simple. So things like expertise has been removed and the hit caps have been modified and changed so that you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now you get to focus on your combat stats to kind of make the game more fun and enjoyable without having to worry so much about making sure you're hit capped and you have this percentage of this and changing your gems and your enchants every time you get a new piece of gear because it modified your hit ratio. And you can listen to me drone on and already kind of tell why that was a bit annoying for players. With all these changes though, one of the things that I was concerned about is, does the game still feel like WoW, or have they basically made a new MMO out of it? And in all honesty, I can tell you, despite all the changes, I really haven't had a lot of exposure to the game in the last couple of years, and I still definitely felt that nostalgic rush hit me the second I started playing. The abilities are still similar enough that it still feels very WoW-ish. The classes feel exactly like they did before, and everything about the world in the game is still very, very similar. This can be a negative or a positive depending on how you look at it. The graphics have also received a visual update, so you can see a lot of the character models look a lot nicer than they used to. The humans with their cheese grater faces have been kind of finally given a little bit of texture and maybe some emotion in their visuals. A lot of the races have had updates for that, and just the world itself has had a nice visual update as well. Compared to other MMOs currently on the market, I am going to say that WoW still lacks in the graphic department. It's significantly further behind than other MMOs, and they've also been optimized pretty well for low-end computers as well. So WoW's big saving grace used to be that it didn't look great, but at least everybody could play it. Nowadays, pretty much everybody can play most MMOs, even on their lower-end computers, but they also tend to have a higher graphical output than WoW. So if you're looking for the shiniest game on the shelf, WoW's probably not your best bet, but it still has a lot of polish over the years that other games are really struggling to compete with. Most importantly, what I'd like to bring forward in this review is that I was having fun playing WoW. Really quickly when I got into this, I wasn't sure if I was going to enjoy myself because I've already really played the game to death. I thought, like, I have no real desire to go back and play Warlords of Draenor. I've pretty much done with WoW and I've moved on to other games in my life. However, after playing through this expansion and doing this review, I actually kind of found myself longing to play a little bit more WoW. I was having a lot of fun, especially when I got up to some of the dungeons and things like that we're going to cover really shortly. It just feels fun. Hitting the buttons and hitting enemies feels fun. Running around in the game feels very fluid and nice. It's one of those things that really doesn't lose its charm. Just the simplicity of the game makes it really enjoyable to play. The complexity makes it really enjoyable to keep playing. It's really nice for players regardless of what you're interested in. Personally, I don't really dive into lore overly much. I don't read a lot of the quests. I'm more of an accept, rush to the end game, and kind of crush the biggest, baddest monsters kind of guy. But I did try to stop myself a little bit to make sure that I covered that in the review for players who are really lore-centric. WoW has never ever fallen short on lore. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest story-driven games that you can find out there. There's so many little intricate details that they never fail to deliver on. Now, some people feel like the game stagnated a bit because the lore has really not shifted too heavily, but that's what WoW does. It's delivering one game to you, and yeah, after 10 years, it's probably going to start to feel a little bit stale, but they do keep trying to shift it and find different ways to make it continuously enjoyable for players. The lore is still there. It's not lacking at all, so if you're interested in the story, this is definitely the game for you. I think WoW, if I had to pick one MMO on the market that's very story-driven, I would say WoW is the one. So one of the things I found when I was leveling up that I thought was kind of cool is this new Garrison mode. Basically what it seems to do, and this is with some limited experience, I didn't have a ton of time to play around with it, is you basically get to build your own personal garrison. It can be upgraded as you go. You can earn lots of garrison points and make little improvements all over the place. Many of them that I didn't get to test out right now, so this is just a base look at how the garrison feature works. The other part that was kind of cool is you get these follower companion type things that you can send out on missions to do for you. So each of the companions has these little subsect statistics that basically up or raise or lower the chance of success on these side missions. So the side missions were, there's not a lot of player interactivity. You basically send them out on the side mission and then you just wait X amount of time for them to return, and then either you collect your rewards or the mission fails. I sent out a few players on these side missions and I had a 100% success rate for my trials, so I'm not entirely sure how bad failure is, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't really affect you too much. Overall, you just do these. It's a bit of a time sink to give you something extra to do on the side. So the one thing that really got me personally interested as an end game oriented player was the new rating system. What WoW has done is they've taken a lot of the problems that players have run into. Anybody who's tried to organize or run or even just be a part of a large raiding guild in WoW or any other MMO has probably run into this problem of a lack of players. At some point in time, either you have too many players or too few players, but having the perfect number week by week is a really, really challenging thing to achieve. So in World of Warcraft, the initial way to deal with this was moving into Burning Crusade. They took the raid size from 40 to 20. That helped alleviate a lot of the stress of managing 40 individual players. What it didn't do, though, was solve the problem of still needing that perfect number. If you have 21, somebody gets left out. If you have 19, you're going to be struggling, and chances are a lot of the bosses aren't going to be possible to kill for a new guild trying out the content. So what they've done is they introduced, in Mists of Pandaria, they introduced something called a flex raid. The flex raid is the same concept as a regular raid, except that you could modify the amount of players and the content's difficulty would scale with it. So if you have an ability or a boss that needed 5 people to do something, if you had a 25-man group, When you lowered it to say 10-man, you might only need 2 or 3 people to do the same action, and making the boss the same level of difficulty, but with the numbers scaled so that it didn't really matter how many players you brought along. The only style of raid that's not going to be following the flex rating is still the tippity-top tier of competitive raiding. The highest tier is the conquest raids, and conquest raids still require you to have a very, very specific number. This is so that the developers can tune the content so that it's extremely challenging, and they can't really let that be flexible. If it's flexible, then you can't tune it to be the most challenging possible, and that's really the goal of conquest raids. So if you're still in a super hardcore raiding guild, you have these 20-man epic, extremely challenging raids to push through. So for the really hardcore players, like myself, you don't have to worry. There's still a lot of challenging content out there. But if you want to raid a little more casually, you can go and do a flex raid, and your numbers aren't going to be nearly as important. Now, don't worry, PvP players, we have not forgotten you at all. Warlords of Draenor has retuned how the gear is going to work for player versus player content. There are now 3 tiers of PvP gear. You start off with something called starter gear, which you basically earn from battlegrounds and strongboxes. Strongboxes are something you get as a reward after you, say, complete a battleground, a rated battleground, an arena, something along those lines. You get these boxes as rewards, and you open and get a random chance at an item. Starter gear you're going to get really, really quickly from doing battlegrounds so that you can start PvPing and not feel like you're at too much of a disadvantage while still giving you that progressional tier that makes MMOs fun. Tier 2 you're going to earn from honor points and strongboxes. So the first tier you're going to get shelled out really, really quickly so you have a baseline of gear to work with. The second tier you're going to have to play things like battlegrounds to earn yourself honor points and slowly buy and have those pieces trickle in. It's going to be a nice improvement on the starter gear, and it's going to be a nice midpoint to let you transition into the third tier. The third tier of PvP gear is what everybody's used to, and it comes from conquest points. Conquest points are the things that you get capped on every week. You cannot earn more than a certain amount of them, and they're going to be earned through rated battlegrounds and arenas. The other great news for PvP players is going to be the changes that are going to probably affect the arena players the most. What WoW developers have changed in PvP is that they felt like a lot of the problems were crowd control oriented in the older versions of the game. Basically, the only way to get a kill on somebody was to lock them down and keep them controlled the entire time, and then blow them up really, really quickly. Other than that, they basically just had unlimited sustain. They could just stay alive forever. Because of this plethora of crowd control abilities, they needed to try to tune the game to let healers spike heal really, really quickly, because you could get controlled for 10 seconds, and after that 10 seconds, your health was clearly going to be pretty low. So they needed to give you a chance to boost yourself back up really fast. This kind of created a bit of an influx in PvP that wasn't a lot of fun. Pretty much your health had to spike up and down really, really fast. So what you needed to do was coordinate all your crowd control abilities so you could blow somebody up. It's fun to have crowd control abilities, and you absolutely should have some in the game to keep that dynamic going, but they felt like there was just too much crowd control. So what they've done is they've stripped out the CC. A lot of crowd control abilities no longer exist in the game. For example, things like disarm has been completely removed. Disarm is gone, it's not a thing anymore. What this does is it cuts down all the crowd control abilities, and it let them take their massive amount of varying categories of crowd control and cut it down to fewer amounts, so it's easier for players to understand. Before, you could stack different types of CC, and they had different amounts of diminishing returns. If you stun somebody 3 times in a row, the duration gets lower and lower and lower until it eventually bottoms out and hits 0 and you're immune to stun. There's a bunch of different categories of crowd control though, so you could stun them, then polymorph them, then cyclone them, and all of these abilities would have full duration. So what they've done now is they've trimmed them down, they've added no crowd control abilities in its own tier. Everything has diminishing returns on something else. This has really, really streamlined the PvP process. Another thing they did is there's always been this issue in WoW where the best in slot gear from PvE is usually really awesome in PvP, or the best in slot gear from PvP is really awesome in PvE, basically requiring raiders to go and play arenas to get items, or arena players to go and raid so that they can get the best weapons so they can win an arena. This gear discrepancy really created a lot of issues, especially back around the Burning Crusade times, where if you had the legendary weapons on a rogue, for example, you were really, really overpowered, and it made winning arenas against teams like that very challenging. Now what they're doing is PvP gear scales up in PvP and scales down in PvE. It separates the systems really well. So if all you have is PvP gear, you're still capable of doing PvE content, but it's clearly not going to be up to par with the actual PvE gear in the game. Alright, so that's a massive amount of changes that we've discussed and gone over, and I think it gives a pretty good idea of what's coming up in the Warlords of Draenor expansion, but this is a review. What do I actually think about everything that's happening? I've said the word like and enjoy and looking forward to an awful lot so far, and that's because, honestly, I had a really good time playing World of Warcraft. I'll tell you the honest truth, I didn't expect to going in. I kind of went into this review thinking, it's WoW, I've played it before, I'm kind of tired of it. I expect that I'm not really going to be all that excited to try out Warlords of Draenor. So for PvE players, it's something I've really been enjoying myself. I love PvEing in games. I think WoW is actually going to pull back a lot of players with Warlords of Draenor. Now my personal fear with all these changes is they're getting rid of the complicated mechanics, they're scaling back the necessity of things, they're making a lot of stuff sound a lot more accessible, which on paper sounds fantastic. Everything being really accessible is a great concept for a game. The issue is that in reality, it's not very practical. When you make things too accessible, you actually kind of remove the fun. A lot of the fun is the challenge of getting there. When killing the boss requires you hitting one button over and over, it's not very challenging, and therefore it's not very fun. In the past, when I've come back to WoW expansions, I've seen these new systems like Raid Finder and thought, oh cool, that's really awesome because I don't have a guild yet, so I can just do a Raid Finder raid and I can experience that. And again, it sounds amazing. The issue is that once I did Raid Finder, I really didn't feel like going and doing the same raid again and again and again, 8 different ways, to experience the content with all the different group options. I kind of felt like once I did it one way, that was really all I needed, and I noticed a lot of other players did that too. The amount of raiding guilds on the server I played on had significantly decreased over time. So I'm a little bit concerned with Warlords of Draenor that they're going to do this simplifying concept, and it's going to be too easy. It sounds really good, I'm really interested in seeing how it plays out, but I'm just a bit concerned that it's going to be, they trim too much fat, and then there's not a lot of game left. There's just very easy loot, very easy concepts, and it becomes more of a casual game with no place for the hardcore players. So in terms of PvE, I expect the raids will be really fun. I think if you're looking for an MMO to play and you're curious or you feel some WoW nostalgia, it's definitely worth picking up if you're a PvE player. I think checking out these raids and seeing if these flex changes allow for more guilds to run more content should be a really cool way to go. I think it's definitely worth your time. Now for PvP players, which is also something I'm very interested in, I think these changes could go either way. You can't really predict it, and unfortunately, while I did the beta testing, there wasn't a lot of options to actually try out the PvP. It was rather limited, and trying to get in queues during the times that I was playing were really challenging, so I didn't get a lot of exposure to it. But WoW arenas have always been really fun. The issue has definitely been the scaling numbers. Burning Crusade, in my opinion, was the best time for WoW arenas. It was really fun, healer mana was an issue, and it was great. After Burning Crusade, they hit a point where basically all the number values were a non-issue. You had unlimited mana, you used your biggest heal over and over. You never really had to worry about anything because it was so easy to keep everybody alive. And this is where the spike damage came in. One individual player would get strong enough that if they popped their abilities and hit the right critical hits, they would crush you instantly. And it wasn't really a lot of fun to play like that because even at the top tier, you really had a lot of random numbers, RNG, causing you to either win or lose, and it was kind of frustrating instead of fun. I still played a ton of PvP, I still like it even with the RNG values, but it wasn't as enjoyable as it used to be, where you couldn't get crushed in a matter of seconds. So with Warlords of Draenor, they've addressed this issue, and they've claimed that they're going to fix it up. I hope to see the developers actually follow through on that, because in all honesty, I haven't played a game yet that has matched the fun of WoW arenas in PvP. I think WoW PvP is pretty good for the Battleground players. I don't really think there's a whole lot of diversity possible in that concept. It's kind of like a game of Counter-Strike. People have been playing the same shooter for 15 years and they're going to keep playing it because it's just fun. You don't really need a lot of ingenuity in that area. Personally, I'm actually going to say I give Warlords of Draenor a thumbs up, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't expect to do that at the start of the review. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the GOMTV channels for more gaming content in the future. Check out any of the Blizzard content for Warlords of Draenor. They are going to be announcing the game. The actual release date is going to be announced on August 14th, along with the cinematic video for the game is going to be released. So make sure you check those out. Thank you very much for watching. Again, my name is Matt, aka Sciar Rathbun, and this has been a WoW Warlords of Draenor review for GOMTV.
It is the lifeblood of this world. children. Soon, its masters. Ours is a legacy of conquest. Rising tide of blood and iron that will wash over this world and all others. Our bond is iron, our will unbreakable. Who will stand against us?